Sonam Wangchuk, welcome and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to interview today. I'm sitting here in Leh. You are sitting in Leh as well, but we're not in the same room because of the coronavirus pandemic. And since you chose, to keep yourself quarantined in the place that you are because of the students that you teach, um, I appreciate that. But let's start with this question that entire India responded to your campaign on ban or boycott Chinese products very positively. We saw people on social media, we saw people talking about your slogan, boycott Chinese products. But one of the issues that has risen out of that campaign is that it is going to affect the livelihood of small traders, small shopkeepers, small businessmen who have had been selling Chinese products, Chinese imported products, and that can actually affect India's economy quite badly. What is your response to this criticism?
First of all, I find it ridiculous that we say we find employment in trading Chinese goods when a decade or two ago there were 10 times more employment making those things in India. Think of all the toys, the bicycles, the shoes and shirts that so many Indians were making. All their employment went to China, and we are not worried about that. We are worried about the few employment in trading somebody else's products. This is like a warped view of what has. I mean, we are like suffering from amnesia if we think that we have always traded with Chinese goods and never made anything. So it's actually an attempt to bring back all the employment India always had of making things itself for itself. And perhaps now we can do it for the world also, because the world is asking India to please get your act together. We want to bring our factories into your country, but only if you are organized. So, this is an amazing opportunity not only to get back all the employment that India always had, but also the ones that China had gotten from around the world by being a manufacturing hub. So, the whole world is asking and expecting India to provide an alternative. So I really don't see much wisdom in this saying.
When we talk of alternatives, what are the countries you're really looking at? Because China is not only the biggest mass producer of products in the world, but it's also a huge, huge market. Compared to China, what are the alternative countries, alternative markets where India can go to or can bring in investment from?
I'm right now talking about market for products, or are you talking about investments?
I'm talking about both.
Yeah.
Indian products going to foreign markets and foreign investments coming to India.
So as for products, out of the 7 billion people, India and China make maybe 2.5 or so. The rest of the 5 are there for us to take our products outwards if we wish. But for me, ecologically, environmentally speaking, I'm happy if we just made things for ourselves. So am I happy for each country making for themselves locally, so that we don't have to move things across the world, polluting the air, the water, and the land. Yeah. So if we want to go global, the whole globe is, looking for alternative manufacturing. Now, regarding investments, also, unlike in the past, today people around the world are wary of China, are apprehensive about its expansionist, moves. It's not hiding its intentions. So people around the world, particularly the the most advanced countries are looking up to countries like India to provide alternative. And if only challenge and only um, you know the problem in this is India itself. The world wants to give India all the manufacturing and all the business that it wants. If any stumbling blocks, that is our own, systems, our own efficiency, and so on. So if we get our act together, countries like Japan desperately want to get out of China. They don't want to have anything to do with China. Korea, exactly the same. America, very much the same. Australia, oh my goodness, they are completely at loggerheads with China. UK, most of Europe, what do you want? And you still, people still think without China, how can we live? It's
So if I can ask you, push you a little further, what is it that makes India so complacent or makes it so lazy or even lethargic? Why are we not getting our act together? What is it that has prevented India from marching ahead?
So if you ask me personally, I have no problems with how India is. Actually, the rest of the world should also be somewhat like how India is, not disorganized, but not very greedy and not very materialistic. I would rather like everybody to be content and happy with what they have. That's how the whole world should be. So India needs to make up its mind. If it values its approach to life of being, happy with little, that's a great thing. That's beyond the most modern uh, country or philosophy. That's postmodern. But if we live like that and our heart is in materialism, you know our heart aspires to the biggest house and biggest car, and we have to live a simple life, that's suffering from both ends. So either you want to go materialistic like China or many of these Western countries, then you have to get your act together. You have to be organized. You have to be hardworking. Whether it will give you happiness or not, I cannot say, but you have to adopt those ways of life. But personally speaking, I think the whole world needs to slow down, relax a bit, like COVID helped us do, and stay happy with little, and thereby be happy and live and let live. Let the birds and bees and plants, trees all live happily. So I have no problem with that also, but we need to make up our mind.
I understand that, but let's look at this issue also pragmatically. India still has a certain level of poverty. We still have massive unemployment. We have people who are looking for livelihood as agrarian economy is sliding. Uh, so, on one hand, I completely agree with you that we don't need to follow the Western style of, greed and corruption and going after the materialistic life. But on the other hand, we have this 70% population in India who are living with minimum basics of life. Uh, don't you think India as a state, as a society, has responsibility to improve their standard of life? For that issue, what do we need to do?
Totally. I totally agree with you. The question is more of equity than of wealth. There's a lot of wealth in India, but it's very inequitably distributed. So therefore, we need to have better systems. Even if we want to, I would always say that we need to create a new path for the world to follow rather than be a Y or Z in the race that they have created. So even in this new path, I don't think anybody who is hungry or sick or cold is contented or happy. That I wouldn't. You have to reach a certain level where people are free from sickness and hunger and so on. But beyond that, money does not work. Beyond that, having 10 pairs of clothing and 10 meals a day actually kills you more than helps you. Yeah. So we need to equitably distribute our wealth, as is a tradition and ethos in Indian tradition. So I would, mm, well, maybe not so practical seeing how things are today, but there needs to be a more equitable system where people understand that material satisfaction ends, and beyond a certain level you have to get more satisfaction from helping others. Yeah. And that's where taking care of the, I would say, roughly 30% who live in very harsh conditions comes. So for successful people in India, I would think success is more in what they do for the remaining 30% than how many buildings and properties they keep amassing. So this is the path we need to show the world also. And it's, I mean, I can tell you that Buddha, 2,500 years ago from India, told the world that for a man, success is more in uprooting a single desire than in fulfilling 1,000 desires.
Yes.
A man who can do that is more successful than the one that fulfills 1,000 desires. And that's what we are chasing today. But the problem is that after the 1,000th desire, there is the 1,001st and the second and the third, and it never ends. Whereas if you can take inspiration from our past and traditions, you will learn to be happy, and even happier by making others happy. But I really, for those of your viewers who think, Buddha and Rama are gone, I'll quote from modern economics. Modern economics, there is a theory called the law of diminishing returns,
Absolutely.
which means that the first pair of shoes gives you absolute satisfaction because you would be walking on thorns and gravel. But the second pair of shoes, not as much. Third, not really. By the 10th or 11th, it hardly gives you any satisfaction. But there is a big but, the Indian touch to that. If you give that 11th pair of shoes to somebody who has none, you are the winner. Then you have 100% satisfaction to somebody else. So even modern economics would come to this.
Absolutely. Now, coming to Buddha, I'm going to bring in the issue of Tibet. I'm going to ask you, do you support Free Tibet movement? A lot of discourse on Free Tibet movement has been revived in the last few days. And we also hear that Tibetans in Ladakh, for example, are now openly saying that this is a critical juncture in their history, and they feel that they are closer to the fulfillment of Tibet as an independent nation. Do you think that optimism is really based in reality?
So I'll connect it to the bigger picture. When I say boycott made in China and Chinese products and Chinese raw materials and Chinese investments, it's not just, anger and hatred. It's ethical. Any source that is a violator of rights of others, you should give up, just as people gave up products made with child labor, violation of child rights. You gave it up, even if they were cheaper. Similarly, I have always been saying that Chinese products need to be boycotted because of these reasons also, ethical reasons. You can care about child rights and animal rights. How about human rights of the 6 million Tibetans, of the 11 million Uyghurs? So definitely for these reasons, the world, the whole world needs to use the same wallets that made China so powerful to bring it down so that countries like Tibet, who have been unlawfully occupied by China, are given freedom. Not only Tibet and Uyghurs, but I would say the 1.4 billion Chinese people are also bonded laborers there. So definitely Tibet, by all means Tibet, but even the 1.4 Chinese people need and deserve freedom.
Thank you so much.